In the heart of Willow Creek, a small southern town where rain fell like a lonesome ballad and the twang of country music hung in the air, Ryan Carter stood on the edge of everything he'd ever dreamed. At 28, he was no longer just the kid strumming a beat-up guitar in his daddy's barn. He was a rising star, a name blazing across the Billboard charts with his album Homebound Heart. That night, in a sleek Nashville studio, the rain pounded the windows like a drumbeat as Ryan leaned into the mic. His voice a deep, gravelly drawl pouring out lyrics of dusty roads and family ties. "Take me back to where the porch light glows," he sang, the sound echoing off glass walls, his cowboy hat tipped low, his fingers calloused from years of chords. He'd made it, sold-out shows, a fat contract with a big-shot label, fans in every honky-tonk from Texas to Tennessee chanting his name. In a world of pickup trucks and Sunday sermons, Ryan was king, a hero to the folks who saw him as the golden boy of their values, hard work, faith, and a family that stuck together through thick and thin. But as the sound engineer gave a thumbs up and the track faded, Ryan's phone buzzed, a text from his mama, Helen, lighting up the screen. "Jamie's in trouble. Said he's gay. Your daddy kicked him out." The words hit like a freight train, smashing through the perfect life he'd built, dragging him back to a rain-soaked night in Willow Creek, where his little brother, just 15, stood alone with a backpack and a broken heart. Ryan froze, the mic still warm in his hand, the rain outside a roar he couldn't drown out. Jamie, his shadow, the kid who'd clapped loudest at his first gig, was gone, cast out by the same family Ryan sang about in every song. His chest tightened, fame fading as fear took hold. What if the fans found out? What if this truth tore down everything? In 30 seconds, his world shifted, and yours might too. Stick around to see how far a brother's love can stretch. If that gut punch hooked you, smash that like, share this with someone who loves a real story, and subscribe to Heart Stories. We're just getting started. Ryan Carter stood motionless in the Nashville studio, the echo of his last note still hanging in the air, the rain a relentless drumbeat against the glass. His phone glowed in his hand, Mama's text searing into his eyes. "Jamie's in trouble. Said he's gay. Your daddy kicked him out." The words were a jolt, a crack splitting the polished surface of his life. And in that instant, the miles between Tennessee and Willow Creek vanished. His mind raced back to that rainy night, a scene he hadn't witnessed but could see as clear as day through the tremble in Helen's voice when she'd called him an hour later. Her words halting, heavy with shame. "It happened so fast, Ryan. Cunning no norm," she'd said, her breath catching over the line. "I didn't know what to do." He closed his eyes, and there it was, the supper table on Oak Street, a picture he'd carried in every lyric he'd ever sung, now twisted into something he couldn't unsee. In his mind's eye, the kitchen flickered to life. Warm and familiar, a sanctuary of cracked linoleum and faded floral wallpaper. The table was set with Mama's care, plates of roast chicken, the skin golden and crisp, a bowl of peas glistening with butter, a pitcher of iced tea sweating onto a doily she'd crocheted herself. Daddy sat at the head, his mill-worn hands carving the meat with a slow, steady scrape, his face etched with the quiet pride of a man who'd built a life from grit. Mama hovered nearby, her apron tied tight, passing a basket of cornbread she'd baked that afternoon, her soft hum filling the room. And Jamie, 15, skinny as a fence post, his dark hair falling into his eyes, sat across from where Ryan would have been, his hands fidgeting with a napkin, his shoulders tight like he was holding a secret too big for his frame. Then it came, the moment that broke it all. "Dad, Mom, I'm gay," one Jamie had said, his voice a quaver cutting through the clink of forks, a confession that hung in the air like smoke. Daddy's knife hit the plate with a clang, skittering across the table, his roar exploding like a shotgun blast. "You're a disgrace." Well, Ryan could hear it, feel it, the way the walls shook as Paul lurched to his feet, his chair scraping back, his face red with a rage Ryan knew too well from boyhood scoldings. "No son of mine's gonna shame this family. Get out," Paul bellowed, his fist slamming down, the peas spilling, the candle flickering as if it too feared his wrath. Jamie's pleas came fast, desperate. "I didn't choose this. Dad, I just wanted you to know me. But Paul was a storm unleashed, grabbing Jamie by the arm, dragging him from the chair, his boots thumping on the floor. Mama's voice was a whisper, barely there. Maybe you should go. Jamie, her hands clutching the cornbread basket, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth, unable or unwilling to meet her son's gaze. Ryan saw it all. Jamie stumbling as Daddy shoved a backpack into his arms, the door banging open, the rain pouring in as Paul pushed him out, shouting, "Don't come back!" Over the howl of the storm, the lock clicking shut like a final chord. Otakirum. Back in the studio, Ryan's breath caught, his fingers tightening around the phone, the rain outside a mirror to that night. Helen's call had come after, her voice a patchwork of tears and guilt. He just said it, Ryan, out of nowhere. Your daddy lost it. Threw him out like trash. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. He's gone, and it's raining so hard out there. She'd paused, then added, Darer, don't tell nobody. Please, we can't let this get out. Ryan's jaw clenched, his heart a tangle of shock and dread. Jamie, his little shadow, the kid who'd sat cross-legged in the barn, strumming chords Ryan taught him, who'd whooped loudest at his first bar gig, was out there alone, 15 and soaked, with nowhere to go. He loved that boy, always had. Jamie's crooked grin when they'd sung by the fire, his quiet, "You're the best," were after every show, but now love warred with fear. Ryan was a star, a country king built on songs of family and roots. And in the Bible Belt, where his fans waved flags and prayed hard, a gay brother wasn't just trouble, it was ruin. He paced the studio, boots clicking on the polished floor, the producer's good take, man fading to static. His mind spun. What if the tabloids got this? What if the fans, good old boys in trucker hats, mamas clutching hymnals, turned on him? Homebound Heart was gold because it sold them a dream. Pickup trucks, mama's cooking, a family pure as a Sunday sermon. Jamie's truth could torch it all. Radio stations dropping him, the Nashville suits pulling his deal, the tour crumbling before it started. He'll be fine, Ryan muttered, shoving the phone in his pocket. He's tough. He'll figure it out. Trekjorn, but the words rang hollow, a lie to shield the panic clawing his gut. He couldn't call Jamie, couldn't face it, not yet. He'd worked too hard, climbed too far, and this couldn't touch him, not now. He turned back to the mic, forcing his voice steady, but the rain kept pounding, a rhythm he couldn't sing over, a beat that whispered Jamie's name with every drop. Ryan Carter's world had always been a stage. Bright lights, roaring crowds, the strum of his guitar echoing through packed bars and arenas. But now, in the days after that rain-soaked night, it felt like the stage was cracking beneath his boots. Back in Nashville, the studio buzzed with the hum of amplifiers and the chatter of producers. But Ryan's mind was miles away, stuck in Willow Creek where Jamie wandered alone. He'd shoved Mama's call to the back of his head, told himself it'd blow over, that Jamie would find his way and the family secret would stay buried. But secrets in small towns are like weeds. They spread fast, choking everything in their path. By the time Ryan stepped out of the studio into the humid Tennessee night, his phone was a live wire, buzzing with notifications that lit up the dark like warning flares. Tweets, texts, souvenirs, voicemails, all carrying the same poison. Jamie's story was out, and it was coming for him. It started in Willow Creek, a whisper in the diner where old men sipped coffee and swapped tales over greasy hash browns. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a cousin, had seen Jamie stumble out of the house that night, backpack slung over his shoulder, rain plastering his shirt to his skinny frame. Paul Carter threw his own boy out. They'd muttered, forks pausing mid-bite. Heard it's 'cause he's one of them. You know, gay. The gossip rolled through the town like a tumbleweed, picking up speed, church ladies clutching their pearls at Sunday service, kids snickering behind the gas station, barflies slurring it over beers at Rusty's Tavern. By Monday, it hit the internet, a spark igniting the dry grass of social media. A blurry photo of Jamie, soaked and red-eyed, surfaced on a local Facebook group, captioned, "Willow Creek's golden boy ain't so golden. His brother's a queer." Ryan's name tagged alongside it spread the fire to his fans. And within hours, the blaze was unstoppable. Twitter erupted, a storm of hashtags and venom. "Ear Ryan Carter hypocrite" trended as fans. Good old boys in trucker hats, mamas in sundresses who'd sung along to Homebound Heart, turned on him like a pack of hounds. Sings about family but can't keep his own straight. One wrote, Patina, the words racking up likes by the minute. All that porch light glow crap, pure fake. Another sneered, a knife to the gut of every lyric Ryan had poured his soul into. Thought he was one of us. Guess not. A third chimed in, the betrayal sharp in every character. His inbox flooded with emails. Fans canceling meet and greets. Radio DJs pulling his singles with Kurt were re-evaluating notes. A venomous screed from a preacher in Georgia calling him a fraud leading folks astray. Ryan scrolled through it all in his hotel room, the neon glow of Music Row flickering through the blinds, his gut churning as the numbers climbed. Thousands of retweets, hundreds of unfollows, a tidal wave he couldn't outrun. The next morning, the suits from his label called, their voices tight over the speakerphone. Ryan, this is a mess. Sakura Shiver, said Chet, the head honcho, his drawl clipped with panic. Your brand's built on family, pickup trucks, mama's kitchen, the whole damn deal. This gay brother thing, it's killing us with the bass. They'd already lost 2 sponsors, some beer brand and a tractor company, pulling out with image concerns. When it and ticket sales for the tour were stalling, red lines slashing through the spreadsheets Chet emailed mid-call. We're talking damage control. He pressed, maybe cancel the tour, rework the image, say you're praying for the kid or something. Ryan's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the phone till his knuckles whitened. He's my brother, he snapped. The words out before he could stop them, but Chet cut him off. He's a liability now. Fix it, or we're done. The line went dead, leaving Ryan staring at the wall, the hum of the AC a hollow echo to the silence in his chest. Back home, Willow Creek buzzed louder. Old buddies from high school texted, half pity, half gloat. Heard about Jamie, tough break. Man, The local paper ran a piece. Country star's family scandal rocks town. The ink still wet when Mama called again. Her voice a frayed thread. Folks won't stop talking. Ryan, they're saying we raised him wrong. That it's our fault. Your daddy's madder'n a hornet. Won't leave the house. Ryan could hear Paul in the background, muttering curses through the thin walls of their Oak Street home. The same walls that had held their family tight till that night. Don't come back yet, Helen added. It'll just make it worse. Worse? How could it get worse than this? His songs yanked from the airwaves. His name a punchline. His brother lost to the rain? Ryan slumped onto the hotel bed, the mattress creaking under his weight, his cowboy hat tossed aside like a relic of a life he didn't recognize. He was mad at Jamie for saying it, for breaking the unspoken rules of their world, for lighting this fuse that torched his dreams. Wow, why'd you have to do this? Kid? Auditorime, he growled to the empty room, his voice rough with a fury he didn't mean. But beneath it, guilt gnawed, sharp and cold, Jamie out there, alone. While Ryan hid behind a mic, chasing applause over blood. He'd built his career on family, sung it in every chord, but now it was crumbling, and he couldn't shake the truth. He'd left his little brother to face the storm alone, too scared to stand in it with him. Ryan Carter sat alone in his Nashville hotel room, the neon glow of Music Row seeping through the blinds, casting jagged stripes across the carpet. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy stillness that pressed against the windows. But inside, a storm raged louder than any thunder. His phone lay silent now, its screen dark after hours of scrolling through the wreckage. Tweets like daggers, emails like eviction notices, the life he'd built as a country star crumbling under the weight of Jamie's truth. He'd turned off the ringer, muted the world, but he couldn't mute the ache in his chest, a gnawing that started as anger and morphed into something he couldn't name. The whiskey bottle on the nightstand was half empty, its burn no match for the fire of guilt licking at his ribs. He'd spent days blaming Jamie, his kid brother, 15 and foolish, torching Ryan's career with 3 little words. But now, in the quiet, the blame turned inward, and the memories came flooding back, unbidden, unstoppable. He leaned back against the headboard, the mattress creaking under his weight, and closed his eyes, letting the past pull him under. There was Jamie at 10, skinny legs dangling from the hayloft in Daddy's barn, a chipped guitar across his lap as Ryan taught him chords. G, C, D, or his small fingers fumbling over the strings, his grin wide when he finally got it right. Let's play it again. Right, Cheater watch. One, he'd begged, clapping those grubby hands, his voice high and bright. The barn's wooden walls echoing with their laughter as dust danced in the sunlight slanting through the cracks. Ryan had slung an arm around him, ruffling his dark hair, saying, "You're gonna be better than me someday, kid." Went to Mom. And Jamie's eyes had sparkled, believing every word. That was the summer Ryan wrote his first song, Firelight Kin, strumming by a bonfire out back while Jamie sang along off-key, his voice cracking over, "Families where the heart stays strong," the crickets chirping a chorus under a sky full of stars. Another memory flickered, Jamie at 12, perched on a bar stool at Rusty's Tavern, sneaking in past bedtime to hear Ryan's first gig. The room was thick with smoke and sweat, old-timers nursing beers, but Jamie's cheers cut through it all, loud and proud. "That's my brother," his fist pumping the air when Ryan finished Willow Roads. Afterward, they'd sat on the tailgate of Daddy's truck, splitting a Coke under the parking lot lights, Jamie's legs swinging as he'd said, You're gonna be famous. "Ryan, I'll tell everybody I knew you first." Ryan had laughed, tousling his hair again, the kid's faith a fuel that carried him from dive bars to Nashville stages. Every song he'd written since Homebound Heart, Porch Light Glow had Jamie in it, his crooked grin a thread woven into the chords. The heartbeat of a family Ryan swore he'd never let down. But now that heartbeat faltered. Ryan opened his eyes, the hotel room snapping back, cold, sterile, a far cry from the barn's warmth or the tavern's grit. He'd let Jamie down, hadn't he? Left him out there in the rain while Ryan hid behind a mic, chasing gold records over blood ties. The thought twisted like a knife, and he grabbed the whiskey, taking a swig that burned all the way down. But it couldn't drown the truth. Daddy's voice echoed in his head. "Family's all we got. Boy." Words carved into him since he was old enough to hold a fishing pole by the creek. Paul's rough hand guiding his cast. Yet Daddy had thrown Jamie out. And Mama had stood by, silent as a ghost. And Ryan, he'd done worse. He'd turned away, too scared of the fallout, too wrapped up in his own spotlight to pick up the phone, to drive back, to find his brother and say, "I've got you." He stood, pacing the room, boots clicking on the hardwood, his shadow stretching long and lean against the wall. Who was he if he let this stand? A star with a hollow crown, singing about roots he wouldn't fight for? The fans could turn, the label could drop him. Hell, the whole damn world could spin off its axis. But Jamie was flesh and blood. The kid who'd looked up to him like he hung the moon. Ryan stopped, staring at his reflection in the mirror. A man in a Stetson, jaw set, eyes tired, barely recognizing the guy staring back. He'd built his life on family, preached it in every verse, but when it mattered, he'd run, leaving Jamie to face the wolves alone. The guilt was a weight, heavier than any stage he'd ever walked, and it pressed until he couldn't breathe. He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, hands raking through his hair. Jamie wasn't just some scandal. He was the kid who'd taped Ryan's first demo on a busted cassette player, who'd slept in Ryan's old t-shirts when he left for Nashville, who'd whispered, "Don't forget me, Rishi," the night before Ryan's big move. And Ryan hadn't forgotten. Not really, but he'd let fear call the shots. Let the roar of the crowd drown out the quiet plea in his brother's voice. Daddy's rules, family first, clashed with the man he'd become. A singer too afraid to live the songs he wrote. He grabbed his phone, thumb hovering over Jamie's number, but stopped. Where was he? Mom had said he was gone, but to where? A friend's couch? A ditch? The thought of Jamie out there, cold and lost, ripped through him, and he knew he couldn't sit still anymore. Ryan pulled on his jacket, the leather creaking as he moved, and fished out a crumpled note from his wallet. A number scrawled by a buddy back home, someone who'd seen Jamie last. "He's with some lady at the bakery," with a guy had texted days ago, a lead Ryan had ignored till now. His boots hit the floor with purpose, the whiskey forgotten, the fear still there but quieter, drowned by a resolve he hadn't felt since he'd first picked up a guitar. He wasn't just a star, he was Jamie's brother, and it was time to act like it. Damn the cost. The road back to Willow Creek stretched ahead, and Ryan was ready to face it, to find the kid who'd always believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself. Ryan Carter's pickup truck rumbled down the rain-slicked roads of Willow Creek. the headlights cutting through the dawn mist. The hum of the engine, a low growl beneath the quiet of a town still waking. He'd driven all night from Nashville. The leather jacket creased against his shoulders. The taste of stale coffee bitter on his tongue. His cowboy hat tossed onto the passenger seat beside a crumpled note. Directions scrawled from a buddy. Jamie's at the bakery on Main with some lady named Margaret. The miles had blurred, asphalt stretching endless under a sky heavy with clouds. But Ryan's mind was sharp, wired with a mix of dread and determination. He'd spent too long running, hiding behind studio walls, dodging the truth, but now, every turn of the wheel brought him closer to Jamie, the brother he'd left to fend for himself, the kid whose absence had hollowed out every song he'd sung since that rainy night. The bakery loomed ahead, a squat brick building with a faded sign, Ellis's Sweet Haven, its windows glowing warm against the gray morning, steam fogging the glass where fresh bread cooled inside. Ryan parked crooked across two spaces, his boots hitting the gravel with a crunch, his heart pounding like it did before a sold-out show. He paused by the door, the bell above it glinting dull in the light, and caught his reflection, tired eyes, stubbled jaw, a man who'd lost more than he'd won lately. He pushed inside, the chime jangling sharp, and the air hit him, thick with yeast and sugar, a sweetness that clashed with the sour knot in his gut. The shop was small, its oak floors worn smooth, shelves lined with loaves and jars of jam, a chalkboard listing pies in a looping scrawl. Behind the counter stood a woman, silver hair, apron dusted with flour. Margaret, he guessed, her eyes narrowing as she sized him up. A stranger in a hat too fancy for this town. Then he saw Jamie. His brother stood by a tray of rolls, thinner than Ryan remembered, his dark hair longer, falling into eyes that flickered with a wariness Ryan hadn't seen before. He wore a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted white from dough, moving with a quiet purpose that stopped cold when he looked up. Their gazes locked, and time stretched. Jamie's face hardening, Ryan's throat tightening. The air between them thick with everything unsaid. Hey, kid. Ryan managed, his voice rough, a crack in the calm he'd rehearsed all night. Jamie didn't move, didn't smile, just stared, his jaw tight, his hands balling into fists at his sides. Margaret stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "You're Ryan, ain't you? Took you long enough." Her tone a mix of relief and reproach, but Ryan barely heard her. Jamie was all he saw. "What are you doing here?" Jamie asked, his voice sharp, cutting through the bakery's warmth like a blade. Ryan took a step closer, boots scuffing the floor, hands shoving into his pockets to hide the tremble. "It came to see you," he said, "to fix this." Jamie's laugh was bitter, a sound Ryan didn't know, echoing off the walls. "Fix this? You're 2 months late. Where were you when Daddy threw me out? When I was sleeping in the damn park, running from kids with rocks?" His words hit like punches, each one landing square, and Ryan flinched, the guilt he'd carried from Nashville flaring hot. I didn't know," he started, but Jamie cut him off, stepping out from behind the counter, his eyes blazing now, wet with a fury held too long. "Didn't know or didn't care?" Jamie snapped, his voice rising, trembling with a hurt that filled the room. "Mama called you. I know she did. You were too busy playing star to pick up. Too scared your precious fans ditch you. I was out there, right alone, cold, thinking my brother'd come get me. But you didn't. You cared more about them than me." He pointed a shaky finger out the window, toward the town that had turned on him, and Ryan felt the weight of every missed call. Every night he'd chosen silence over action. "Jamie, Ryan tried, but the words stuck, useless against the truth spilling from his brother's mouth. Margaret watched, arms crossed, her silence a judgment Ryan couldn't dodge. "I got chased, beat up," Jamie went on, his voice breaking. "Lived off scraps till Miss Maggie took me in. She's more family than you ever were. Her, a stranger, while my own brother left me to rot." He swiped at his eyes, angry tears streaking his face, and Ryan's chest caved. The image searing into him, Jamie, his little shadow, bruised and hungry, hiding in shadows while Ryan sang to sold-out crowds. "I was scared," Ryan admitted, his voice low, raw, stepping closer till he could see the flower on Jamie's lashes. "Scared of losing everything, the music, The fans, Surasushirinawarum Surasun, the life I built. I thought you'd be okay, that it'd pass. I was wrong, damn wrong, and I'm sorry. And the apology hung there. Heavy, real, but Jamie shook his head, stepping back. The distance between them a chasm Ryan hadn't seen till now. Sorry don't fix it, Jamie said, his voice dropping, hard as stone. You picked them over me, same as Daddy, same as Mama. You're just another voice that didn't want me. The words were a mirror, reflecting Ryan's cowardice back at him, and he saw it clear. The man he'd become, a singer who'd sold his soul for applause, leaving his brother to pay the price. Margaret spoke then, soft but steady. He's been fighting. Ryan stood up at a town meeting, faced them all, braver than most. Where were you? Ryan looked at her, then back at Jamie, the kid who'd once idolized him now standing taller than he ever had. And the shame burned deeper than any whiskey could touch. He took off his hat, holding it in both hands. The brim creased from years of wear, and stepped closer, voice breaking. I messed up. Jamie, I ran when I should have fought. You're my family, more than any song, any crowd. I see that now, and I ain't leaving until you know it too. Jamie's eyes flickered, anger warring with something softer, but he didn't speak, just turned away, grabbing a rag to wipe the counter, his silence a wall Ryan didn't know how to climb. Margaret nodded toward the door. Give him time, she murmured, but Ryan shook his head, planting his feet. He'd come to face the truth, Jamie's pain, his own failure, and he wouldn't run again. The bakery hummed around them, the oven ticking, the air sweet. But the real heat was in Ryan's chest, a fire lit by a brother's hurt, a flame he'd stoked till it burned true. Ryan Carter lingered in Ellis's sweet haven, the bakery's warm air thick with the scent of yeast and sugar. But the chill between him and Jamie hung heavier than the morning mist outside. Jamie had turned away, wiping the counter with a rag, his silence a wall Ryan couldn't breach, not yet. Margaret's words echoed in his ears. He's been fighting, braver than most, and Ryan saw it now. The steel in his brother's thin frame, a courage he'd lacked when it mattered. He'd come to Willow Creek to face Jamie, to own his mistakes, but standing there, hut in hand, he knew apologies weren't enough. Words wouldn't mend what he'd broken, action would. The town's hate, the fans' scorn, the label's threats. They'd taken his career to the edge, but Jamie was the line he wouldn't cross again. Ryan squared his shoulders, the resolve hardening in his chest like a chord struck true. And he knew what he had to do, stand up, not just for Jamie, but for the man he wanted to be. He left the bakery with a nod to Margaret, her eyes soft but steady, and drove straight to the town square, the gravel crunching under his tires as Willow Creek woke to a gray dawn. The old gazebo stood there, weathered and chipped, a stage for 4th of July jams and church picnics. Ryan's first gig had been under its roof, strumming for a handful of folks on folding chairs. Now, it'd be something bigger. He called his manager, voice low but firm. Set up a show here, tonight, Nutsawantuma, free for anybody who'll come. No suits, no tickets, just me and the guitar. The guy sputtered, You're crazy. Rye, the tour's hanging by a thread. But Ryan cut him off. Do it, or I'm done. And hung up. The decision a weight lifted, not added. Word spread fast in a town this small. By noon, flyers were taped to lampposts, whispers buzzing through the diner, the barbershop, the feed store. Ryan Carter's playing tonight, something about his brother. Summy. The day blurred, Ryan tuning his guitar in the bakery's back room, Jamie watching from the doorway, silent but there, his presence a tether Ryan clung to. Margaret baked extra rolls, her hands steady as she said, Folks'll come, some to cheer, some to jeer, but they'll hear you. Dusk fell, the square filling with faces, old-timers in overalls, kids on blankets, mamas clutching purses. A crowd split between curiosity and contempt. Ryan stepped onto the gazebo, boots thudding on the creaky boards, the spotlight harsh against the night, his hat low, guitar slung over his shoulder. The air crackled, murmurs, glares, a few claps, but he didn't flinch, just leaned into the mic, his voice a gravelly drawl cutting through the tension. Y'all know me. Who'd he started? Ryan Carter, Willow Creek's boy, singing about home and kin. But I got something to say tonight, and it ain't just a song. He took a breath, the crowd hushing, eyes sharp on him. My brother Jamie, he's 15, and he's gay. And 2 months back, my daddy kicked him out. And I didn't do a damn thing. Didn't call, didn't come, just hid while he fought alone. That stops now. Gas rippled through. A few boos, but Ryan pressed on. Voice steady. I've sung about family my whole life. Porch lights, mama's table, but I forgot what it means. It ain't about making somebody fit your mold. It's loving them as they are. Standing with them when the world turns mean. Jamie's braver than me. He faced this town. Took the hits, and I'm proud as hell of him. Trunum, he glanced backstage, where Jamie stood with Margaret, eyes wide, hands clenched, and Ryan's throat tightened. I let him down. Let y'all down too. Pretending to be something I wasn't. This is me, flawed, scared, but here. And if that cost me every fan, every deal, well, I'd rather lose it all than lose him again. The crowd stirred. Some walked off, muttering. Hats pulled low. Others stayed, faces softening. A few clapping slow, uncertain. Ryan strummed a chord, the notes ringing out, and launched into a new song. Brother of Mine, one he'd scratched out on the drive. Raw and real. He's got a heart that don't bend, a soul that won't break. He sang, My brother of mine, I'll stand for his sake. His voice carried over the square, deep and unshaken, the lyrics weaving Jamie's fight into every line. Rain-soaked nights, fists and stones, a kid who wouldn't bow. The booze faded, drowned by the melody, and when he hit the last note, a hush fell, then applause, sparse at first, then swelling. Not thunderous, but enough. Jamie stepped forward, hesitant, and Ryan dropped the guitar, pulling him into a hug, tight and fierce, the crowd blurring as he whispered, I've got you. Kid, always. Back home, the echo reached Oak Street. Helen slipped into the square late, her coat pulled tight, tears streaking her face as Ryan sang, her hands trembling in her lap. Paul came too, lingering at the edge, his cap shadowing his eyes. Arms crossed, silent but there, a crack in the wall he'd built. The label called mid-show. Chet's voice sharp. You're playing with fire. But Ryan hung up. The line dead, his choice made. The tour might shrink. Sponsors might bolt. But the fans who stayed, clapping, nodding, saw the man behind the hat, not just the star. Afterward, Ryan sat with Jamie on the gazebo steps. The night cool, the crowd gone. You didn't have to do that. Jamie said, voice soft, eyes still wary but warmer. Yeah, I did, Ryan replied, slinging an arm around him. You're worth more in any stage. The square emptied, stars peeking through clouds, and Ryan felt it. A shift, not just in the town, but in him. He'd stood up, sung the truth, and though the road ahead was rough, fan letters to burn, gigs to cancel, he'd chosen Jamie. Chosen family over fame. Helen approached, tentative, her I'm sorry a whisper swallowed by the wind. Paul trailing behind, his nod stiff but real. It wasn't fixed, not yet, but it was a start. A chord struck raw and honest. A song Ryan would keep playing, no matter who listened. The night air in Willow Creek settled cool and crisp as the last echoes of Brother of Mine faded from the gazebo, the crowd thinning under a sky where stars punched through the clouds. Ryan Carter sat on the steps, his guitar resting beside him, its strings still humming with the weight of what he'd done. Jamie slumped next to him, their shoulders brushing. The silence between them softer now, not healed, but mending. The square was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers folding blankets and Paul's truck idling at the edge, its headlights cutting the dark. Ryan's chest felt lighter, unburdened by the truth he'd sung, but the road ahead loomed uncertain. Fans lost, a career teetering, a family fractured yet reaching for repair. He'd stood up for Jamie, faced the town, and though the cost was steep, the gain was deeper, a melody truer than any chart topper he'd ever chased. Jamie shifted, kicking a pebble with his sneaker, his voice low. Didn't think you'd do that. Stand up there. Say all that. Tut, Ryan glanced at him, the kid's face lit by the gazebo's faint glow, eyes still guarded but softer, the anger dulled by something like trust. Had to. Durium, Ryan said, his drawl steady. You're my brother, worth more than any song I'll ever write. Jamie's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close, and he nodded. leaning into Ryan's shoulder, a small move, but it felt like a bridge rebuilt. They sat there, the night wrapping around them. The hum of crickets, a quiet chorus to a moment Ryan knew he'd carry forever. He'd lost plenty, half his fans, a chunk of his tour, but he'd found Jamie again. And that was a trade he'd make 1,000 times over. Back at Ellis's Sweet Haven, the days began to shift. Jamie stayed, bunking in the room above the bakery, his sketches piling up. Birds, trees, now Ryan with his guitar, pencil lines capturing the brother he'd reclaimed. Ryan stuck around too, trading Nashville's shine for Willow Creek's grit, helping Margaret knead dough when he wasn't strumming. They'd work side by side, Jamie shaping rolls, Ryan cracking eggs, flour dusting their shirts as they laughed over lopsided loaves. The bakery, a haven where family grew from shared sweat and quiet talks. "You're getting good at this," Ryan teased one morning, nudging Jamie as a tray came out golden. And Jamie grinned. "Learn from the best, Miss Maggie. Not you," to his jab light. The ease between them, a balm to months of strain. The music changed too. Ryan reworked his sound, trading polished anthems for raw ballads, songs of love that didn't fit molds, of roots that bent but held. Brother of Mine hit the airwaves, not topping charts but finding a new crowd. Folks who'd felt the sting of rejection, who heard their own stories in his chords. The label grumbled, tour dates shrank, but Ryan didn't care. Every note was honest, every gig a stand, and the fans who stayed clapped louder, their hands calloused like his, their hearts open where others had closed. He played small venues now, bars, barns, town halls, Jamie in the front row, hollering like old times, his cheers a thread tying Ryan's past to this new, truer present. Home shifted too, slow but real. Helen came by the bakery one afternoon, her coat clutched tight, eyes red as she hugged Jamie, whispering, "I should have fought for you. I'm so sorry." "Baby." He stiffened, then softened, hugging her back, a crack in the wall between them. Paul was slower, his visits rare, dropping off firewood, grunting a, "How you holding up?" course to Jamie, his cap low, his pride a stubborn knot. One night, he lingered, watching Ryan and Jamie strum on the porch, the old guitar passing between them like it had in the barn years ago. "Sounds good," he muttered, voice rough, then walked off. But he'd stayed till the end, a step, not a leap, but enough for now. Ryan saw it. Their family wasn't whole, not yet, but the pieces were shifting, fitting back in ways they hadn't before. Weeks turned to months, Willow Creek settling into a new rhythm. The bakery thrived, folks drawn by Margaret's bread, by the story of a star who'd traded fame for kin, by Jamie's quiet grit. Ryan's voice carried on, not as loud but deeper, singing of a love that didn't judge, a home that didn't shut doors. He'd sit with Jamie at dusk, the porch creaking under their weight, strumming soft as the sun dipped low. The kids' sketches scattered around them, pictures of a family redefined. "You ever miss it, the big time?" Jamie asked once, his pencil pausing over a sparrow's wing. Ryan shook his head, grinning. "Nah, this is better. You're better." Jamie smirked. Sap, but his eyes shone, and Ryan knew he'd found his real song, not in crowds or charts, but here, in the brother he'd almost lost. Ryan wasn't the golden boy anymore. His hat was scuffed, his dreams smaller, but he was Jamie's brother, and that was gold enough. The town still whispered, some still sneered, but others nodded now. Their hey, Ryan a quiet respect. He'd learned family wasn't a picture-perfect chorus. It was messy, bruised, real, a tune you played through the cracks. Standing by Jamie, he'd found his soul again, a man who sang what he lived, not what sold. The rain came soft one night, tapping the roof as they played, and Ryan smiled. Home wasn't a place, but a promise kept, a harmony worth every fight. This tale's about love that bends but holds, about finding what matters when the lights fade. What's your family worth to you? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear. If this hit your heart, smash that like, share it with someone who gets it, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more real, raw tales.